is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime in association with Micromax.
The need to train an entire generation of Indians in some skills, in some vocational training is imperative, it's key, it's urgent, and many say it should be undertaken on a war footing. It's also been described as a priority for the government, but on the ground, challenges are many. What are the lessons that we can learn? What are the course corrections that need to be made immediately so that we meet our targets and perhaps even manage to make young India key players not only on the domestic in the domestic arena but also on the international stage? That's what we're looking at today with a very special panel. Joining me now, Rajiv Pratap Ruri, Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship.
Hello.
Thanks very much, sir, for being with us. Sanjeev Dugal, CEO and Director, Centum Learning. Dr. Naresh Trehan, Chairman, Health Sector Skills Council, and of course, Chairman and MD of Medanta. And Papa Keswani, Chairman and MD, Lemon Tree Hotels, also Chairman for the Sector Skills Committee for Hospitality, Travel and Tourism. Thanks very much all for being with us. So if I could just start by asking you, we've spoken about our targets, we've spoken at length about whether they are realistic or not. Now we just have a couple of years to go before we're supposed to be training 500 million, have trained 500 million Indians. Do you believe that we shouldn't get caught up in the numbers but work on the ground and just training as many as possible?
So that's why we're talking about speed and scale, skill, speed and scale all together. Numbers are there, and it's not that when we are talking about this 500 million people in the unorganized, as an unorganized workforce, they have some sort of a training and they are still employed. But whether they are underemployed, unemployed, that is a big question. And what we are struggling is that once you are talking about employment, there are children who are passing out from school or they are school dropouts. There are people who are doing their ISc, their BA, their BSc. Even if you have done as one of the assessment states that 17% of the engineering graduates are employable.
Right.
That means every 100 engineer trained today, only 17 are employable.
Right.
So if that is the situation, what we are talking is about education. 10 years of school education, yes, but it may not be good enough to make you employable.
Right.
But 10 years of school education and 10 weeks of classes affiliated to the Sector Skill Council run by Dr. Trehan makes him employable.
Right.
So we are talking about this employability, and if that gradation is brought up, he is capable of being employed internationally.
Right.
So that is how we are going to work about it.
Right. Dr. Trehan, if I could just get you in at this stage, there's of course one view that we really haven't made vocational training or skill training cool enough. Why don't people think it's aspirational? Have we tied it to jobs on the ground, to a good income, perhaps more than you can earn with a conventional degree?
If you step back a little bit, any project, any thing that you want to start, you have to have the full blueprint at least thought out at the base level. So unless there is visibility for that person who is unemployed or is desirous of getting employed, that what is in the middle, what is at the end of it as far as employment is concerned, and then the progression pathway.
Right.
Because supposing I take at the lowest denominator is what we call a GDA, General Duty Assistant. Is he going to be a GDA for the rest of his life? Is he committing it? But is it the entry to a pathway where he can be a technician, he can be a manager?
So is the
down the
messaging
line?
a problem, sir?
Absolutely. Communication is one major thing. The other is the disarray internally in us. When there are so many layers that have come up over a period of time, the realization was almost 10 years ago that we are going to have this demographic advantage will turn into a demographic disaster if we do not respond. And slowly many things happened, but I'm so happy that last year the government brought it from the back burner to the front burner and turned up the burner and said, this is war footing. But that's all rhetoric. How do we implement it? Then they made the department, then the minister, it takes time to, but I think now, there is a phrase which says, we go with what we got. Because if we get entangled in ourselves, it will be another 3 years by the time we start.
Right.
We are already 50 years late.
Right.
So I'm saying, one meeting of whoever needs to be. If it's the Prime Minister who's going to drive it and Mr. Rudy Pratap is going to, right, let them be on the same table.
Right.
Whoever is relevant, whether we are relevant, we should be there.
Right.
Spend
Get the stakeholders, the key stakeholders together.
2-3 hours.
Right.
Executive decisions on war footing. When you say, that means you have a war room.
Right. I'm just going to
You take the war room and you take that by the end of the day, you say, we will go with what we got.
Right.
We will refine it, define it as we go along.
Fair enough. I'm just going to get you to respond to that, sir, before I open the panel up. It's now or never.
I would like to add a small point.
Sure,
What Doctor
sure,
said is absolutely clear. I'm so happy Doctor is talking in absolutely clear and crisp terms. I'll just give you, all this would require government initiative, which means government support both by means of creating facilitation and investment. A small example, why is Dr. Trehan, why Lemon Tree of the Day and Educom of the Day, they are required, is basically that if we talk of Germany, which has a very advanced skilling system, if the government spends $3 billion US dollars, the industry spends $30 billion US dollars. So that is the partnership to skill that nation.
Right. Exactly. But are you going to try and set up this meeting that Dr. Trehan is talking about?
Pardon?
With the Prime Minister that he's talking about?
Well, I need the support of all these people, and I'm happy Dr. Trehan, out of his busy schedule, is here with us talking about skills because he's passionate, and there are many. When you talk about the Hotel Sector Skill Council, there is Vicky Oberoi, and so many such people who have name and faces.
Right.
They are there and
Putting
saying
their
that
weight behind
we
this.
have to do this.
Right.
So, two things. We are talking about the national skill policy, which we are going to announce, and we are also talking about a mission headed by the Prime Minister on skill. So that national skill mission, which we are talking, which is like any other mission, should be taken up, and that is where I need Dr. Trehan and all in the industry. And actually, I can say the Prime Minister is aware. He's been talking about it across the world. He's talking in his each and every speech. He's just looking for a formulation, and very shortly, I think we'll be able to give that formulation. And maybe on the World Skills Day, which is 15th of July, we could be doing it, but we need many more confirmation.
Okay, we'll watch this space for more. Mr. Duggal, as someone who's sort of involved with this on the ground, the points that Dr. Trehan has raised, that people don't know the end result. Where am I going to go from here? Am I going to be stuck here? You see lots of people who are still willing to go to a third or fourth sort of layer institute just to try and get a conventional degree because they're not quite sure what's in it for me. How do you challenge that? How do you battle that on the ground on a daily basis?
Well, from our experience, what I've discovered is there are 4 or 5 levers that need to be pushed. Okay, and I think as long as we get agreement on that and push those, I think we'll move forward rapidly. Because sometimes what happens is because there's no consensus and multiple views, we may push the wrong levers. Let me tell you what my experience is. One, let me work backwards from the employer. The quality of employment and the number of employment has to be generated. I'll explain what I mean by quality. Our experience is if you train somebody and you place him, let's say, in a manufacturing factory environment, attrition is low because the quality of life is better. The quality of employment is better. He stays in a hostel, there is sports, there is food, etc. The moment you go to the service sector, attrition is very poor. The desire to work is low because you have to move to cities, towns. There's no, on minimum wage almost you have to survive in chammaris, you have to, 5 of you have to live together, send money home. So the quality of employment has to shift for it to become aspirational. Okay? Because people are leaving homes and they're moving from there to work. Secondly, we have to find some sort of a calibration between where people live and where jobs are because people are not willing to move very far because these are not very high paying jobs unless they're going out of the country. Thirdly, the challenge with skills is about mobilizing and filling classrooms. People don't have the money to pay for it. Right? See, the capex, the capacity, the machinery, the building, that's not the challenge. That is easy to do. The content is not a challenge, it's easy to do. Generating faculty is not a problem. It's just about.
You would say that.
Yeah, I'm saying that's not the challenge. And if you look at those as the challenges, that's work in progress. Right? If you say let's produce 1 million trainers, it can be done. Okay, let's build 100 buildings, it can be done. But how do you get hundreds of millions of people to leave home, sit in a classroom, attend that training, learn that skill, leave home and find a job? That's what needs to be correct.
That's an important point. You're talking about hitting the ground running. Just take off, get together, figure out what needs to be done. But given the vast numbers, given the number of people involved, given that there's this central policy, states have their own thing, do you sort of see it all coming together?
That's what I'm talking about. That you need a central decision, from top to bottom or bottom to up, whichever way you like, to say this is the stream. In healthcare, this is what's going to happen. In hospitality, this is going to happen. These are the layers. Everybody is aligned because the number of ministries involved and the secretaries who turn up at meetings and start saying things which turn the clock back by 2 years, 3 years. It's a disaster. So I'm saying only the Prime Minister and Mr. Pratap Rudy, when they align this whole thing, I personally believe you sit across the table, listen to everybody, and then you take an executive decision. If you are wrong, off by 10, 15, 20%, course correction can take place anytime. He mentioned one thing that is more important than local employment. When these people are trained and they have worked for 2-3 years, they are so eminently employable around the world. Right. Do you know that the world today needs 40 million jobs to be filled by skilled people which are going begging? So you take in our field, nurses are being taken away by the hundreds, right? We don't have the capacity to produce because it takes years to get a license to make a nursing college. So these things have to be aligned, but let's the central movement start. And if the top management of our country is involved, all these can be cut through. Where do we have shortage of doctors? Our doctors are needed everywhere in the world, but we can't open a medical college. The most credible people can't open medical college today. So where is that decision going to come from? The top government. So I'm saying it is something which is more than war footing, because the fire is burning very fast. And we know every economic theory says this, that if your demographic advantage is not turned to advantage, it is a fit case for revolution. Right. Every economic theory says that.
Right.
Small. What we have entrusted Dr. Trehan with the Sector Skill Council, which is recognized by Government of India. So he doesn't have to go to nursing schools anymore. He has to create a qualification pack for a nurse, different nomenclature, bring it below it, and train as many people and certify. So we are trying to fine tune it, because what he says is exactly the problem. We have to look for a process of qualifying, that's called the qualification packs, where the national occupation standards mapped in the Sector Skills Council in the health sector, from the general duty assistant to whatever level which you are, even if it is so many equipments which have to be handled, and he has to do it. And I think if Dr. Trehan and similar people who have a whole setup now create the qualification packs, do that training, certify them, and make them world standards, we do not need any more regulation. The new concept which has come with the Sector Skill Council is the industry will decide the demand and create the manpower required for it. So this is where the migration is taking place.
Right. Talking about industry, Mr. Kiswani, do you believe that there's one view that this is for the corporates, so therefore it should be done by the corporates? The minister they're talking about, look at the example of Germany, look at how much industry is investing into this in Germany. Do you see, industry sort of standing up to the challenge?
Fundamentally, the Indian economy and the German economy is very different. To begin with, 50% of India's population is employed by 16% of GDP or 14% of GDP now, which is agriculture. Okay, and within the remaining 86% of GDP, where the other half of the population is employed, the government still has a very large and commanding share of the economy. You got to keep in mind that most of the economic activity in Germany is private, and in India it's not. I am given a number, I'm not sure how correct it is, that about 55-60 million people are in the organized sector in India. The real issue, in my opinion, is two. In fact, there are three. First is that every year as we speak, the population is growing at 16 million. Okay. Number two, very valid point raised by Sanjeev, which is that we are not able to attract people to those jobs and sectors where the maximum jobs are coming up. That's the problem. You see, the maximum jobs are coming up, for example, in construction, as an example, one of the sectors. But people are not interested in working. So there is an aspiration mismatch between demand and supply. I think industry has to play a major role. I think the current government is very focused on helping the economy grow, and therefore, obviously, I see long term that the private sector will become a larger and larger shareholder in the total economy. And therefore, the private sector has to play, in my opinion, a leading role. The issue will be very simply, each Sector Skill Council as it is set up will have to convert the standards that we are putting together, the packs that we are putting together, convert that into getting people, that is pulling people to come in for training, then give them a reason to come into that sector. Okay, the problem I find is that many people are now, their aspirations are changing completely.